Well, good morning, boys and girls. Today is day 10, and I'm wearing another one of my Christmas jumpers. Now then, today's series is called Hero to the Rescue. And today we're learning about a lady called Ruth. Now, Ruth's husband had passed away, and her father-in-law had also passed away. And so her and her mother-in-law moved back to her mother-in-law's hometown. And they were poor. They didn't have a lot of money. So it was harvest time. And so they decided to go along and work in the fields. And what they would do is they would take a basket with them and they would pick up all of the grain that was left on the floor. Now, there was a man who owned these fields. When he looked out and he saw Ruth, he knew who she was because she knew her mother-in-law from years ago. So Boaz said to his workers of the fields and said, on purpose, deliberately, leave a little bit of the food on the floor so that when Ruth comes along, there's more grain for her to pick up and to take home with her. So they did as they were told. Then when it came to lunchtime, as Boaz was feeding the men from the fields, he also gave some of the food to Ruth. When at the end, Ruth went home, where she had expected to pick up a few handfuls of grain, she went home with a full basket. And when she showed her mother-in-law was over the moon. And then Ruth pulled out the leftovers of her dinner, which was still enough to feed them again. And she said, "Whose field did you collect this from?" And when she said, "A really generous man whose name is Boaz." And so it turned out, as we fast forward a little bit more through the story, Boaz and Ruth get married. And so he comes to the rescue. See, she once was poor, but now as he marries her, he brings her into his family. And so, because of this, she then becomes wealthy. And her mother-in-law never have to worry about going around and trying to glean out little bits of food from other people's fields. And this is a little bit like Jesus. Now, it's worth knowing that back in those days, things were very different, that actually women were treated very differently to men. And so that actually it explains a little bit as to why Ruth was classed as poor just because her husband had passed away. So Boaz came in as the nearest relative, but also chose to look after both Ruth and her mother-in-law, who was called Naomi. So as he stepped in, it's kind of like the way that Jesus did with us. He looks and he sees the mess, he sees the poverty that we're in, he sees the troubles that we have, and he steps into it and wants to rescue us. Now, what's your family like? My family is very different. When Nick and I got married, I've got 3 children that live in Liverpool. And my children come down and stay with us quite often. My eldest is now 17. And it was Nick's birthday just this week. And my eldest sent a text to Nikki to wish her a happy birthday. And I sent my eldest a text just saying, "Hey, thanks for sending such a nice message to Nikki." Do you know what her response was? "Well, why wouldn't I? She's now family." But that's just it, isn't it? See, now Nikki's part of our family. Families look very different. But God is welcoming you and me to join in his great family. So, I learned something new today. Do you know why Boxing Day is called Boxing Day? Well, I wondered maybe if it was just because when you opened all of your presents you had lots of empty boxes. But it wasn't that. When I was growing up, quite often there was boxing on the television. But it was nothing to do with that. In fact, actually, it was also known as St. Stephen's Day. And this was named after a person who, according to tradition, it was a day when the aid boxes, so people gave money through the year into this box for St. Stephen, and then on Boxing Day it would be opened in the churches and the money would be shared out among the poor. Isn't that lovely? So this is the real reason that it's called Boxing Day, because the box of money would be opened and given to the poor. Okay, so here's something to have a think about and you can talk about with your families. Have you ever done something that is kind for somebody, even though you didn't have to? And what was it that made you do that? Shall we pray? Dear Jesus, thank you for making a way for us to be part of your family, even when you didn't have to. And thank you for loving us always. Well, today's craft, we're going to be colouring in this is a sheath of corn, and this is a chance for you to be able to colour in the wheat there and put that onto your tree. So guys, thank you very much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.